Well, welcome one and all to Bike Racing Without Mercy here at the Olympic Velo Circuit. Once again, I'm going to be clinging on for grim death by my fingernails to the back of the peloton here in a Masters race to build a little bit of fitness for the main season. This video is going to show a little bit about what I've been doing over the last few months to build back over a bit of a lull over the winter. Also got a nice little testing in the lab to show you exactly where my fitness lies, courtesy of Adam Isherwood.
In order to set up the lab testing part of the video, here's a very brief taste of some of the crit racing that I've been reacquainting myself with since January, forming a core part of my weekly cycling routine. Fusing speed and the exhilaration of riding in a fast group, endorphin production is profuse, plus a tough 15 minutes of training, and that's whether it's Cat 2 or 3 or Masters. And in turn, this has yielded fitness adaptations, which I hoped would be verified by the lactate, CO2 and oxygen data in the laboratory in late February. My racing goals are very modest, the epitome of simplicity, or more accurately, lack of talent. Try and hang in a bunch till the end. And even this low-hanging ambition requires me to push way outside my comfort zone, racking up 6 to 8 minutes of anaerobic 400 watts or more, and 15 to 20 minutes greater than 318 watts. That's a hard VO2 max for me. And these irregular and uneven efforts are the kind that build both fitness and confidence. Yep, riding in a group is intimidating, and even more so having broken my back and neck in 22, but it focuses the mind and you learn to hold your line at 38 to 43 kmh average speed for the 50 minutes, depending on the race and of course whether I get dropped or not. In terms of the cycling training, I've complemented this with my old faithful tempo with VO2 max surges, and often also a Zwift race and the rest zone 2. I've then sprinkled in a couple of all body strength training sessions plus 2 full rest days and left to simmer. Typically getting in about 6 to 7 hours of training per week, and the top end power has been building nicely. So now time to test in the lab and find out where my physiology lies, in order to set my power zones for the Gran Fondo Strada Bianchi and to provide a foundation to build from thereafter.
Strange old race there. Full gas for about the first 20 minutes. Then there was a bit of confusion with the ladies. So we're kind of soft pedaling for almost 10 minutes or so. And then final 10 minutes or so, pace ramped up, got nice and surgy. But happy to have stayed in the bunch to the end. Managed to chase back on right at the very end when there was a breakaway, but then burn all, and I mean all, of the matches. So let's now transition to the laboratory with Adam Isherwood from Oxford University for the lab test. See where the fitness lies. And back in the lab with Bike Racing Without Mercy's first Minister of Sports Science and Physiology, none other than Adam Isherwood. How are you, Adam?
Oh yeah, not too bad, Phil.
Good to see you. PhD is going well, is it, sir?
Yeah, full on, but getting there. Excited to have Phil back in the lab for a bit of exercise testing.
Yeah, I'm proper excited. And of course, as always, the level of concern is high, because first we're going to test the lactate threshold 1, see where that resides, and then on to the 3-minute ramp test. 3-minute increments to find out where my anaerobic threshold is, i.e. my FTP.
180 watts. Adam is about to test my lactate baseline, and we're looking to establish when we rise 1 millimole from the baseline. There will be my lactate threshold 1, the first turning point where the lactate in the blood is starting to accumulate, but nice and easy. Body's able to buffer it and clear it, the maximum endurance pace. If my FTP is set correctly, this should be the inflection point between zone 2 and zone 3. Setting my FTP correctly is the name of the game in a 3-minute ramp test.
And it's up at 2.2. No, okay, I'll take another one just to make sure.
Yeah, but I was expecting about 1.4 there.
Yeah, as we usually expect around.
Yeah, 2.2 is quite a high baseline.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that to be the true baseline, put it that way.
Well, remember last time It did go up quite quickly to 1.8 and then came down to 1.4.
Yeah, and the kind of literally like the excitement of the test can be enough to elevate it a bit. So
and trust me, the LT1 test is exciting.
Yeah, so what we're seeing at the moment is something that's kind of inherent to even lab testing. You get variance in readings. So for example, the lactate meter we're using is a Lactate Pro 2, which is like the best handheld meter you can use. It. The only thing that would be better would be a kind of chemical clinical analyzer. So what, like, you know, something that's half the size of a room. But even then, we're getting variance of kind of 0.4, 0.5 millimolar, taken at the same power, taken from the same ear. So I'm taking from Phil's earlobe rather than his fingers, just to make sure that it's more consistent. Because otherwise, the action of holding the handlebars can actually slightly change the lactate in the capillaries in your fingers. But yeah, we're getting a bit of variance. But I've been testing a couple of times at each of the power levels, just to make sure that we're getting consistent readings. And yeah, they're varying, as I said, by 0.5, 0.4 millimolars, which is why we're looking for this 1 millimolar or above sustained elevation in lactate above this baseline level that we calculated in the easier powers, just to make sure we're then confident that the change is physiological rather than coming from expected variation in the blood lactate meter, or just in terms of you can get heterogeneity, the amount of lactate in someone's bloodstream, for example. It's another reason why we're doing 6-minute steps, just to make sure that what's the blood that I'm getting out of Phil's earlobe is truly representative of his whole metabolic system. Or, you know, the lactate that's coming out of his legs, but it takes a little while to circulate around and equalise. So that's why we're not getting exactly the same readings each time. But actually, that's just inherent to this testing and any testing, basically.
So 1 is the magic number.
Yeah, that's where we know that's greater than the expected kind of variance that we're going to get anyway. That's where we're more confident there's been a true physiological change, and then we can say, yeah, that's Phil's LT1. Yeah, so I'm at 2.8 now, so I think that's borderline. I'll take another one quickly just before we switch over.
Right on the borderline here. 210 watts. 200 on the Favera Astiomas.
.5, so yeah, I think we're still just below, but I think we're creeping up on it now.
So baseline 2, currently at 2.5.
Those watching might question why we're not just doing lactate test at the end of each of the steps for the ramp test we're going to do to ascertain Phil's VO2 max. The reason for that is, to do a ramp test properly, you need the steps to be relatively short, because otherwise you spend too long at each stage and then you'll fatigue, you'll fatigue because of things like substrate depletion, so you run out of glycogen before you can actually get to a true VO2 max. Effectively, you want the ramp to come up relatively quickly. Whereas here, the bare minimum we'd want would be 3-4 minutes for each of the steps, in order to be confident that the lactate that I'm reading from Phil's earlobe is reflective of what's happening in the muscles. So I've got the stages set at 6 minutes here, which is kind of gives us a nice bit of leeway there. And that just means that there's time for when the power changes, that the muscles can then respond. They don't respond immediately. There's a kind of metabolic feedback, which means the amount of glycolysis is going on and the amount of lactate is being produced. It's not immediate. It will then itself kind of start to rise. So it gives time for the increase in lactate production in the muscles, then the efflux of it, so it coming out of the muscle into the bloodstream, and then circulating around, homogenizing in the blood, and then appearing in this instance in the capillary beds in his earlobe for me to measure. So that's why we're doing them as 2 separate tests, rather than trying to contrive a way of doing both, because his lactate may still be rising at the end of 3 minutes where it should have stabilised at 6 minutes. So that's why we separated out the tests. Still at 2.5?
Oh yeah, 2.5 it is. Versus a baseline of 2. Onwards to 230 watts. 220 on the osteomas.
I think your intuition's going to be good. You're reckoning about what, 210, 215 on
I reckon, yeah.
pedals, yeah, so. .9, I think we're pretty much there. I'll take one more now just to...
2.9. That's 1 millimole. So 230 on the lab bike, 220 on the osteomas.
Yeah, I'll do that.
2.9, we're calling it. Cheers.
So there we have it. Lactate threshold 1, somewhere between 210 and 220 on the Favero osteomas. Super happy with that. Lactate threshold 1 is a proper, useful physiological marker for the cyclist to be aware of. Definitely if you're riding the Grand Fondos or the longer events or the Hort routes, it's super helpful to know exactly what your maximum endurance pace is, i.e. the inflection point between zone 2 and zone 3, if your FTP is correctly calculated, and if therefore your zone 2, zone 3 inflection point is right on the lactate threshold 1, because you know that when you're riding at the lactate threshold 1 level or in and around there, the body is easily able to buffer the lactate and recuperate the various different energy systems, allowing you to push a little bit harder, maybe even tempo on the climbs. Oh, not much more than tempo for me on the climbs. Anyway, onwards to the 3-minute ramp test. Each segment, as Adam says, 3 minutes rising in 25 watt increments is proper disgusting. And now for the main event. Adam, how did you describe this?
Yeah, I think I've described it before as it's a frog slowly boiling in water. So it's a step test, so it'll be 25 watts every 3 minutes. We're going to start at 175 watts and then we'll go up from there. So this will be just below this LT1 that we've just established. It'll take Phil through as LT1, then up through as LT2, which is the same as your maximal lactate steady state, or as we'll determine it from here, it'll be a respiratory compensation point, which is just the same threshold but determined from the gas data rather than from lactates.
Is that like your anaerobic threshold? Or?
Yeah, so that's
FTP.
Yeah, so FTP, critical power, they're all looking at the same threshold. But as I explained, we aren't able to do it with lactates here because we'd have to set that test up specifically, and we wouldn't be able to do all three of. We wouldn't be able to do LT1, LT2, and VO2 max in one go. So we're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. So that'll take him all the way through, and then he'll just the power will just keep increasing in a stepwise fashion until he can go no more, and then from that we'll be able to get his VO2 max as well, which is his maximal capacity to take up and utilise oxygen. So that's whilst the number itself isn't as useful as these lactate thresholds for training, the value that you get is quite nice as a way of tracking your fitness. Your VO2 max is something that's trainable, and it's quite consistent test to test, and we're using exactly the same testing protocol that we've used previously. That means we'll be able to directly compare Phil across time, and therefore we can see what his kind of total aerobic capacity is and where he's sat relative to when we've done previous tests. So yeah, let's get going.
So I am once again Adam's amphibian in boiling water, and we're going to go VO2 to the max.
Yeah,
cheers.
Let's go.
So Adam, I have a prediction. I believe my anaerobic threshold, my FTP, is around 260 to 265 watts, just based on the sensations I've been getting, but also a max effort on everybody's favourite training ground, Alpe d'Huez. That was a 49-minute effort at 260 watts, but I'd had a bit of tempo before then.
Yeah, it'd be really nice to overlay that and see just how close Phil is able to predict his numbers when he's training based on based on his experience, and then also some of the stuff we've done in the lab previously, and be able to get a feel for what heart rate and what breathing rates should align with what threshold. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what the numbers say.
We're going to see if my Spidey sense is good, and I have got my Spider-Man jersey on. Well, the colour, but yeah, close. Or my amphibious sense.
Cool, so we're up to 225 watts now. So we're above, we're at or above where we thought Phil's lactate threshold 1 would be. So we're really starting to get into the weeds with it. This is we up to your classical zone 3 training zone. So it's starting to get kind of glycolytic without being unsustainable effectively. But we won't be here for long. We'll be jumping up and up quite quickly, and we up past his FTP in no time, I'm sure.
275. Still 275. 14.5 minutes in.
Yeah, 10 seconds are up, 300.
And nearly 15 minutes in.
Now,
300.
oh, that's halfway through, 325.
Oh, I only made it through 30 seconds of the 350. Always could the mental fortitude have taken me longer. I got to get better at the mental fortitude. That felt good. Exhilarating, Adam. We'll hit the results in a second. So the moment of truth, Adam.
Cool. So what we've got here, I'll work backwards from the VO2 max and then through the 2 lactate thresholds. So what we've got here is Phil's VO2 max, which is 62 milliliters per minute per kilogram of body weight. So yeah, it's quite impressive. Over 60 is really strong. That's kind of you know, amateur riders will be kind of healthy individuals who do kind of habitual exercise but don't do a huge amount. You're talking about maybe 40, 45. Kind of people who cycle, you know, a decent amount. You're then moving up into the 50s, and then into the 60s is kind of where, you know, people who race a lot or train a kind of a substantial volume where they're found. So this is just quite impressive.
And where would my little hero Lance Armstrong be?
I can't remember off the top of my. I think his data has been published. I think he'd be.
Is he 80?
Yeah, 78, 80,
Ooh.
something like that. The top pros. You're
Some way to go.
Yeah, top pros. You're into the mid-high 70s. Highest ever recorded, I think, is 80. No, I think it's up in the 90s. But yeah, like pros are high 70s, low 80s, something like that.
So where is my anaerobic threshold, my LT2?
So in terms of the,
or is it VT2? Sorry.
So this would be, so strictly speaking, this would be VT2. So
Yeah.
these are all looking for the same threshold. The physiological underpinnings for lactate threshold or maximal lactate steady state, so LT2, or the ventilatory threshold 2, which is respiratory compensation point, or FTP or critical power. It's the same. The metabolism and the physiology underpinning them are the same. It's, can you maintain a metabolic steady state or not?
So tell us where I'm at on that.
So for Phil's VT2, so this is respiratory compensation point. This has happened at 271 watts on the ramp test, which is a decently high number. I think you were thinking it would be about 260.
Yeah, I reckon about 260, 265 on the Aciomas, because obviously this is the lab bike.
Yeah,
so that is actually about.
Yeah, so that's a lie.
That's about 261.
Yeah,
I got it. Spidey sense was correct. Hi, thank you. Talk us through here. What does?
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
this is
so-
just dots to me.
So up to here, you've got a linear relationship, and then basically what you get then is a break point where the VCO2, so the amount of CO2 you're producing, will carry on rising with the workload.
So which dots are the CO2?
So these are both. There's a relationship between the two.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
So how do you see it breaking? Show me.
well, so it's harder to see on this one, but you can see the two regression lines here. You can see this one's kind of running linear with the grey dots. So the grey ones are the ones predicting to be below the threshold, and the red ones above. You see some of them are either side, but this is the issue. Human data is quite messy. So this will run linear, and then basically at this point your body's unable to buffer against the acidosis in your bloodstream. So the pH in your blood will actually, it won't stabilise. This is what we're talking about with everything being whether it can hit a steady state or not. It won't stabilise. It will start to drop off. You get accumulation of hydrogen ions, which is what causes the pH to drop, and that will drive your ventilation. It basically drives your ventilation above and beyond the workload demands. So the pH drop itself will then drive your ventilation up massively. So you then start getting you get runaway ventilation. It stops being linear with the CO2, and it kind of kicks up here. So if you carried on for longer, you expect it to kind of carry on going up this way.
I wish I had carried on for a little bit longer. I wanted to get at least a minute and a half through that 350. I only managed 30 seconds. I'm still disappointed. Anyway,
impressing on this. We got a plateau for the VO2 max, so the actual number came out. It's the plateau would carry on at the same VO2. It's just it might be able to go for longer.
but we were testing mental fortitude as well. Anyway, so
During the lab test, Adam, who's a true subject matter expert, provided a huge amount of valuable insight, including how to use the data in our training and the implications of the various thresholds. So I'm going to break that out into a separate video. More to come.